Lords, I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, we are investing in particular in sustained improvements to teaching and leadership in schools serving these communities and in other targeted programmes including the literacy and numeracy strategies, Sure Start, Excellence in Cities, Academies, London Challenge and Aiming High. The last of these focused particularly on underachieving black and ethnic minority pupils. Last year's GCSE and test results show that the attainment gap for Pakistani and Bangladeshi pupils has more than halved since the year 2000.
My Lords, I thank my noble friend the Minister for his reply, whilst congratulating the government for improving standard for all pupils in primary and secondary education in the last 6-7 years. Will he accept that the attainment gap between Pakistani, black and white working class children compared with the national average and Indian children is still unacceptable? My Lords, last night I had the pleasure of presenting certificates at a tuition centre, Best Tutors, where year 8 and 9 children were achieving excellent grades, A star, because of the hard work that local communities in Leighton are putting into education. Will the government consider encouraging and funding more homework groups, tuition centres and supplementary weekend schools to achieve higher standards?
My Lords, my noble friend is right that there is still more progress to make, and I particularly pay tribute to the work of supplementary schools, which he just mentioned, which do outstanding work with our minority communities. Only last week I hosted a reception for ambassadors, high commissioners, and those many others who are engaged in leading our 5,000 supplementary schools nationwide. However, I think we can point to the great progress that's been made by the Pakistani and Bangladeshi communities in particular. In the year 2000, 29% of Pakistani and Bangladeshi pupils achieved 5 or more good GCSEs, compared to 49% of all pupils. By last year, attainment had risen by 19 percentage points in the Pakistani community and 23.7 percentage points in the Bangladeshi community, compared to an average national increase of just under 5 percentage points. As I say, more than halving the attainment gap. So very good progress is being made in these communities, but there is still more to be done.
Lords, would the Minister not agree that children from Muslim communities, as the Minister has just said, are in particular achieving very good results in our schools, but it is important for the government to focus on improving education for all our children, the quality of education, regardless of background?
My Lords, I couldn't agree more, which is the reason why we're making such big investments in all schools, including the big increase in budgets for all schools, which was announced in the budget recently by my right honourable friend, the Chancellor.
Does the Noble Lord the Minister not agree that the key word in the Noble Lord Ahmed's question was poorest? This is the common factor in low educational attainment rather than ethnicity. Chinese, Indian, Irish and mixed white and Asian heritage children achieve results higher than the national average. Will the government therefore redouble its efforts to reach its target of eliminating child poverty?
My Lords, we will certainly continue our efforts in that regard. But I should point out that if you look at the population of pupils that are eligible for free school meals, it does break down very differently between ethnic groups. The Pakistani and Bangladeshi community of those who are eligible for free school meals perform significantly better now than the white working class community. And if you look at the population of schools which have the highest concentration of pupils with free school meals, there is a very wide variation of performance. And of course our challenge as a country is to see that we raise all schools to the highest level of performance, accepting of course that those that have poor intakes face much bigger challenges.
The Minister referred in his reply to Sure Start centres, and I know the government is giving priority to establishing these in areas of social deprivation. But would he agree that there needs to be a especially proactive reach out from these centres to poor families who don't know what's going on, and especially immigrant communities? So I think there is something special in that regard.
My Lords, the Noble Lord is absolutely right about the importance of Sure Start working with its communities more widely, which is part of the reason why it is placing such emphasis on community engagement in all its activities. And of course with primary schools in the area too, as more primary schools themselves become the location for children's centres, I believe that their outreach will improve accordingly.
Would the Noble Lord agree that,
that in our very proper concern with excellence and high standards in education. We should find every way possible to celebrate the work of teachers in the poorest and socially most demanding parts of our country, and to give them all possible support in the front line which they're tackling.
I entirely agree with my noble friend, and indeed we're doing a good deal to celebrate the work of teachers. My noble friend Lord Putnam and the work he's done with the National Teaching Awards comes immediately to mind. But of course the best thing we can do to celebrate the work of teachers is to see that they're paid properly. And under this government there's been a very significant real terms pay increase for teachers, which has been particularly attractive, of course, to teachers who face the biggest challenges.
The noble lord agree that parents and carers play a very important part in encouraging and motivating children? And would he perhaps also agree that in some immigrant communities, language is a huge problem in enabling parents to support their children in school?
My Lords, all the research completely supports the noble Lord's point that parental engagement is as important as any other factor in the performance of children. My noble friend referred earlier to the work of supplementary schools. One of the outstanding contributions that supplementary schools make in our minority communities is to engage with the parents as much as with the pupils, and instill a joint desire to learn, particularly amongst those for whom English is not a first language.
Does the noble Lord the Minister recognise the need to recruit more foster carers if children in the care of the state are to achieve their potential in school?
I entirely agree with the noble Earl, which is why we're looking at arrangements to improve incentives for foster carers to see that the number of those coming forward is increased.
Could I ask the Minister whether he is making any special arrangements for the people from these communities who end up in those other state-run schools in Her Majesty's Young Offender Institutions?
My Lords, as the noble Lord knows well, we've significantly increased the support for education for children in custody under the age of 18, including new entitlements for work and training that simply weren't present before, and responsibility for prison and young offender education has moved from the Home Office to my department, where we hope it has been given a stronger education focus.
The Lord Howarth of Newport.
My Lords, I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, road traffic law and the highway code apply as much to cyclists as anyone else. Enforcement of the law is a matter for the police. They can prosecute cyclists who ride dangerously, carelessly, ignore traffic signs or signals, cycle on the pavement, or commit any other road traffic offence. These offences carry maximum fines between £500 and £2,500. Also, £30 fixed penalty notices can be issued for cycling on the pavement by police and community wardens.
My Lord, does my noble friend agree that those cyclists who habitually ride on the pavement, shoot red lights, ride the wrong way up one-way streets, ride without lights after dark, assume that they can get away with this illegal and antisocial behaviour because no one is going to be able to identify them? Would the government therefore be willing to consider carefully as to whether a new requirement that cyclists should display on their clothing a personal registration number, clearly readable, and carry a registration card containing relevant information, would confer benefits that would outweigh the bureaucracy and the costs that the system would entail?
My Lords, I detect that proposal hasn't won universal accord in the House. We'll look at it, my Lords, but I think my noble friend will recognise that we do have to keep the problem of law-breaking cyclists in perspective. On the whole, my Lords, problems with road accidents lie elsewhere, not too much with cyclists.
My Lords, does the Minister realise that the pedestrians may feel intimidated by cyclists on pavements, but cyclists feel often intimidated by road vehicles, and that cyclists ask for no more than what pedestrians rightly expect, which is to have separate lanes from road vehicles?
That's right.
The noble lord is right that in fact cyclists of course do disproportionately suffer from accidents on the road because they are a vulnerable group of users. That doesn't excuse riding on the pavement, however, my lords, which is against the law. But, of course, I think the noble lord will recognise that we want to make the roads safe for all users, which requires consideration by all road users for others, which, of course, is the basis of the Highway Code.
Would the noble lord the minister agree that the real problem to which the noble lord Lord Howarth referred is enforcement, and the priorities of the police do lie otherwise than in prosecuting cyclists? They have huge priorities to attend to. When the enforcement is going to be gradually transferred, I think, to police community support officers. There is a programme for the next 3 years for a massive increase in these people, as there is a programme for increasing the number of wardens. Would the Minister carefully review the powers which the CPSOs have and the wardens have to make sure they can issue tickets and report for prosecution the people who are committing the offences? So at least we shall put enforcement in place. Secondly, would he look at the local transport plans, which is before him at present, to ensure that they contain adequate provision for cycling?
My lords, as I indicated in my original answer, community officers already enjoy the power to levy a fixed penalty of £30, and the noble lord is right. We are looking towards that strategy rather than dependence upon the police with their many other priorities in order to enforce the law as far as cyclists are concerned. But I'm glad the noble lord's brought the other dimension as well into the equation, namely how we can make the roads safer for cyclists. And we are embarked upon a strategy for local authorities to improve provision for cyclists. And a number of towns are carrying out pilot studies which we're looking at very closely to see ways in which that can be done.
My lords, isn't one of the problems not that many local authorities are totally inadequate in the way they supply facilities for cyclists? In my own borough of Hammersmith and Fulham, it is virtually impossible to cycle, as I found, without actually infringing the law, short of repeatedly dismounting the bicycle.
There's no doubt, my lords, that there's a challenge as far as safety for cyclists is concerned, and provision, particularly, I think, in our big cities and our large towns. That's why, in fact, as I indicated a moment ago, we are looking at pilot studies which are being carried out by a number of authorities to see more effective ways in which they can guarantee aspects like cycle lanes and some protection for cyclists and separate them off from the rest of the road users, which is the surest way of guaranteeing their safety, and let me say, the safety of pedestrians.
Lords, will the noble minister agree that this is a matter which is causing quite a lot of concern, and that never a day goes by, really, with those of us who drive cars don't have the experience of a cycle going straight past a red light when we're all stopped by it? Would it not possibly be better if the cyclist had the highway code and other details issued with a bicycle when the bicycle is sold? Because I don't think half of them even know what the highway code says.
I think, my lords, with the weight of traffic which has developed over recent years, there has been a growth in the culture of ignoring red lights by some cyclists, and that's a very dangerous offence to carry out. But I don't think it's, my lords, that it's a problem of not knowing what a red light means to a road user. You'd have to be, I think, a fairly dim cyclist not to know that you're meant to stop.
There appears to be general agreement that this is a serious problem, particularly for the elderly. I've heard the figure that there were over 1,000 pedestrians in London injured by cyclists last year. Perhaps my noble friend could confirm that figure, and he has outlined a whole battery of possible offences. Could he indicate whether there have, or how many convictions there have actually been for this?
Well, I think it's fair to say, my lords, we're in the early days of the fixed penalty notice regime, which we expect to tackle this problem because we are concerned about cyclists causing accidents, pedestrians, on pavements, and we are employing a strategy to reduce that problem. But I think my noble friend will recognise that when we look at all the issues of road safety, the clash between pedestrians and cyclists is one of the more manageable areas in comparison with the target figures for deaths which occur for motorcyclists and car drivers.
On the balanced way in which he's responded to the concerns and frustrations of people who use the road in relation to cyclists. Might there be some opportunity perhaps to remind cycling organisations, which have quite a deal of power in these matters, of their obligations to remind members of what they should be doing correctly and legally on the road?
My Lords, I'm grateful for that constructive point. The cycling organisations act very responsibly in these terms, and they're combining together in Cycling England, a new body which has got resources to promote safety for cyclists. But it'll not surprise the House to recognise that those who offend are least likely to be members of the organisations.
My Lords, does the noble Lord the Minister remember my noble friend, the late Lord Clerk of Kempston? He was run down by a bicycle outside this house and very, very nearly died at the time. In fact, it's probably true to say he never fully recovered from that accident. At that time, my Lords, assurances were given about the proper enforcement of the law concerning bicycles, particularly about effective lighting and conformity with road signs. My Lords, can the noble Lord the Minister tell us why the situation seems to have got worse? Only yesterday, my Lords, a bicyclist was nearly caused chaos by riding across the pedestrian crossing outside this house. It really is time something was done.
Well, the government's responsible for the situation getting worse, my Lords, in one respect, namely that we're keen to encourage cycling, and there are more cyclists. And of course, some won't, a proportion, will not act responsibly. But the noble Lord is right. The temptation where cyclists see wide pavements to think that they've got the right to share them with pedestrians is against the law. It does happen, and when it does, of course, it's not surprising that pedestrians are caught unaware.